Imagine this. You love someone so deeply that your soul literally tied itself to his. You give him your throat, your future, your everything. Then one night, in blood and chaos, you almost die for him. Actually, you do die. At least that's what everyone believes. Your mate, the Alpha King, mourns you. He screams your name into the moon until his voice breaks. And then, he puts his mark on your sister. Your sister. Now picture waking up months later, alive, scarred, angrier than any wolf has the right to be, only to discover the man who swore you were his forever is sleeping in the bed you used to share, with the girl who used to braid your hair. How would that feel? Would you disappear forever and let them have their happy ending? Would you walk away quietly so no one has to feel guilty? What could you do? Tell us in the comments section. Chapter 1, Shadows of the Bond. The moon hung low over the jagged peaks of the Silverwood Pack's territory, casting a silvery glow that danced like whispers across the forest floor. I, Arya Voss, stood at the edge of the ancient clearing, my heart pounding in rhythm with the distant howls of my kin. At 23, I was no stranger to the wild pull of the wolf within me. But tonight felt different, charged with a promise that made my skin tingle. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, mingled with something warmer, more intoxicating, the musk of my mate. Draven Blackthorn, the Alpha King of our pack, emerged from the shadows like a storm-given form. His broad shoulders cut through the mist, his dark hair tousled by the wind, and those piercing amber eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that stole my breath. He was everything an alpha should be, fierce, unyielding, a leader who commanded respect from every wolf in the realm. But to me, he was more the man who had claimed my soul under the blood moon 2 years ago, binding us in a mate bond so deep it felt like our hearts beat as one. Arya, he growled softly, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. He closed the distance between us in 3 powerful strides, his hand cupping my cheek with a gentleness that belied his strength. You've been out here too long. The pack worries. I smiled up at him, leaning into his touch. The warmth of his palm against my skin was a balm, chasing away the chill of the night. I needed the air, my king, the stars. They remind me of that first night we shifted together. My voice was soft, laced with the memory of joy, the way we'd run side by side, our wolves intertwining in playful chases, until exhaustion brought us back to human form, tangled in each other's arms. Draven's lips curved into a rare, genuine smile, one reserved only for me. You always find poetry in the chaos. He pulled me closer, his arms enveloping me in an embrace that felt like home. I buried my face in his chest, inhaling his scent, wood smoke and wild herbs uniquely his. In moments like these, the world faded. No rival packs encroaching on our borders, no whispers of unrest among the elders, just us bound by fate and love. But even in this bliss a shadow lingered. My sister, Ilara, no, wait. The user said not to use Ilara. Let's correct. My sister, Lila Voss, had always been the brighter star in our family. Younger by 2 years, she was vivacious, with golden hair that caught the light like sunlight on water, and a laugh that could charm the sternest warrior. We'd grown up inseparable, sharing secrets and dreams under the same roof. Yet since Draven chose me as his mate, a subtle rift had formed. Lila's eyes would flicker with something unspoken when she saw us together. Envy? Longing? I pushed the thought away, unwilling to let it tarnish our bond. That night, as Draven and I walked back to the pack house hand in hand, the happiness swelled in my chest like a blooming flower. Tell me, I whispered, what does the future hold for us? He stopped, turning me to face him under the moonlight. His eyes searched mine, filled with a depth that made my knees weak. A lifetime of this, he murmured, his thumb tracing my lower lip. Pups running through these woods, your laughter echoing in our halls. You are my queen, Arya, my everything, my... Our kiss was slow, searing, a promise sealed with fire. His hands roamed my back, pulling me flush against him, and I melted into the heat of his body. The mate bond hummed between us, a living thread of desire and devotion. When we parted, breathless, I felt invincible, as if nothing could sever what the moon goddess had woven. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. The next morning dawned crisp and unforgiving. The pack gathered for the annual hunt, a ritual to strengthen our unity and stock our larders for winter. Draven led the charge, his wolf form a magnificent black beast that commanded awe. I shifted beside him, my silver fur gleaming as we bounded into the forest. Lila joined us, her lithe golden wolf nipping playfully at my heels, a reminder of our childhood games. The hunt was exhilarating at first, the wind whipping through my fur, the thrill of the chase as we pursued a herd of elk. Draven's mind linked with mine through the bond, his thoughts a steady anchor. Stay close, my love. I sensed danger ahead. I pushed forward, adrenaline surging. But then chaos erupted. A rival pack, the Shadow Claws, ambushed us from the underbrush. Snarls filled the air, claws and teeth clashing in a frenzy of fur and blood. I fought fiercely, protecting Lila as she faltered under an attacker's weight. Run! I mind-linked her, shoving her toward safety. In the melee, a massive gray wolf lunged at me, its jaws snapping inches from my throat. I twisted, countering with a slash that drew blood, but another enemy flanked me. Pain exploded as fangs tore into my side, hot and blinding. I staggered, blood soaking my fur, the world blurring around the edges. Draven! My mental cry echoed desperate. He was there in an instant, his roar shaking the trees as he tore the attackers apart. But it was too late. The wound was deep, poison from enchanted claws seeping into my veins, a forbidden weapon that burned like fire. I collapsed, shifting back to human form involuntarily, my vision fading. Draven knelt beside me, his hands pressing against the gash, his face a mask of terror. Arya, no. Hold on. The healers are coming. I reached for him, my fingers weak on his cheek. I love you, I whispered, the words tasting of blood and regret. Always. His eyes filled with tears, something I'd never seen from my unbreakable alpha. You can't leave me, fight, damn it. But the darkness pulled me under, a void that swallowed everything. The pain, the love, the light. When I awoke, it was not in the pack's healing den, but in a damp cave far from home. My body ached, every breath a labored rasp, but I was alive. Barely. A rogue healer, an old woman named Mira with herbs and ancient spells, hovered over me. The poison nearly claimed you, child, but the moon goddess spared you for a reason. Days blurred into weeks as I recovered in secrecy. Mira explained that the pack believed me dead, my body supposedly lost in the river during the battle. Draven had mourned publicly, his howls echoing through the nights. To return too soon would risk exposing Mira's hidden sanctuary to the Shadow Claws, who still hunted survivors. The pain of separation gnawed at me, a constant ache in my chest where the mate bond throbbed faintly, like a distant echo. I missed Draven's touch, his voice, the way he made me feel whole. But there was a strange, bittersweet joy in survival, a quiet smile in knowing I had cheated death. I trained in secret, honing my wolf strength, intellectual puzzles from Mira sharpening my mind. She taught me forgotten lore about bonds and betrayals, planting seeds of resilience. Yet rumors reached even this isolated cave. Draven, in his grief, had taken a new mate to secure the pack's future. And that mate? My sister Lila. The news hit like a fresh wound, tearing open the scars I'd barely begun to heal. Sadness flooded me, painful, raw, imagining them together, his hands on her where they once caressed me. How could he move on so quickly? Was our bond so fragile? But beneath the hurt, a spark ignited, happiness in my own aliveness. A smile through tears at the thought of reclaiming my place. I wasn't dead. I was reborn, stronger, ready to face the storm. As I stared at the cave's entrance, moonlight filtering in, I whispered to the night, I'm coming back, Draven, and when I do, everything changes. Chapter 2. Whispers of Return. The cave mouth framed the moon like a jagged silver frame. I stood there longer than I should have, bare feet numb against cold stone, letting the night wind carry faint traces of pine and distant pack scent toward me. Somewhere out there in the heart of Silverwood territory, Draven was breathing the same air. Somewhere out there he was touching my sister. The thought landed like a blade between ribs, sharp, clean, impossible to ignore. I pressed my palm flat against the rough cave wall until the stone bit into skin. Pain was useful. Pain kept me present. Pain reminded me I was still flesh, still bone, still here. Mira appeared behind me, silent as always, her shawl drawn tight against the chill. You're not ready, she said, not accusing, just fact. I know. My voice came out thinner than I wanted. But waiting feels like dying all over again. She didn't argue. She never did when grief was speaking. Instead, she pressed a small leather pouch into my hand. Ground wolfsbane root mixed with silver leaf and something darker, something that smelled faintly of iron and old blood. Protection, not poison. It'll mask your scent for a few hours, long enough to see without being seen. I looked down at the pouch. You're giving me permission to walk into a nightmare. I'm giving you permission to choose whether the nightmare owns you or you own it. That was the closest Mira ever came to comfort. I left at moonset, when the sky turned the bruised color of old grief. The forest welcomed me like it had never forgotten my footsteps. Every tree I passed remembered me running beside Draven, laughing, chasing, falling into soft moss with his mouth on my throat and his growl vibrating through my bones. The memories weren't gentle. They were knives dipped in honey. I moved carefully, staying downwind, using the old game trails only deer and ghosts still knew. My wolf pressed against the inside of my skin, restless, hungry, furious. She wanted to run straight to the pack house, crash through the great oak doors, bare her teeth at everyone who had dared forget us. I forced her back. Not yet. The pack border came too soon. I crouched behind a fallen cedar, heart slamming against ribs. From here I could see the great stone and timber house lit warm against the night, lanterns in every window, smoke curling from chimneys, laughter drifting on the breeze. Life had continued. Of course it had. I waited until the sentries changed shift, then slipped across the invisible line that separated ours from mine. The first thing I noticed was how clean everything smelled. No trace of my blood on the wind, no echo of the battle that should have marked this place forever. They had scrubbed me out. I kept to the shadows of the stables, then the herb gardens, then the laundry yard where sheets still hung frozen in the night air. That was when I heard it, a low, familiar laugh. Not mine. Leela. I pressed myself against the cold stone wall of the wash house and edged forward until I could see the rear terrace. There they were. Draven stood at the stone balustrade, forearms braced, staring out over the dark forest exactly the way he used to when something troubled him. Moonlight carved his profile sharp, jaw tight, brows drawn, the same beautiful, brutal lines I had once traced with shaking fingers after we made love until neither of us could speak. And beside him, close, too close, stood Lila. She wore a deep green cloak lined with silver fox. My cloak, the one Draven had draped over my shoulders the night he marked me. She reached up and touched his arm. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. She spoke too softly for me to hear the words, but I saw the shape of them. Gentle, coaxing. Draven's head dipped. A long moment passed where neither moved. Then he turned fully toward her. One large hand rose, slow, almost reluctant, and cupped the side of her face. My knees buckled. I caught myself against the wall, claws scraping stone. He leaned down. She rose on her toes. Their lips met. It wasn't violent. It wasn't desperate. It was careful, tender. The way people kiss when they are still learning each other's edges and are afraid of cutting themselves. I should have looked away. I didn't. I watched every second. Watched his thumb brush her cheekbone. Watched her fingers curl into his shirt exactly the way mine used to. Watched the way his shoulders relaxed by fractions like he was finally exhaling after holding his breath for months. Something hot and bright burned behind my eyes. Not just tears. Rage, hurt, and beneath it all, cruel, unwanted, humiliating relief. He was alive. He was breathing. He hadn't thrown himself into the river after me. He hadn't let the pack fall apart. He had chosen to keep going, and that choice looked like my sister in my cloak in his arms. The kiss ended. Lila rested her forehead against his chest. He wrapped both arms around her, slow, like he was still convincing himself this was allowed. I slid down the wall until I was sitting in the damp grass, knees drawn up, forehead pressed to them. Breathing hurt. Everything hurt. But under the hurt, quiet, stubborn, almost vicious, was something else. A pulse, a thread, thin as spider silk but real. The mate bond. It hadn't snapped. It hadn't transferred. It was still there, stretched taut and bleeding, but there. He could kiss her. He could hold her. He could even, God's help me, start to love her. But he hadn't erased me. Not completely. I lifted my head, looked up at the moon, cold, indifferent, beautiful. A tiny, trembling smile curved my lips. Sad, painful, but real. I'm still here, I whispered to the night. You don't get to forget me that easily. I stayed until they went inside, until the terrace doors closed and the lights dimmed one by one. Only then did I rise. I didn't run. I walked. Every step hurt. Every step felt like power. Because I wasn't a ghost anymore. I wasn't a memory. I was flesh and fury and memory and love and betrayal and survival. And I was coming back. Not to beg, not to break, but to be seen. The next time Draven Blackthorn looked into the dark and thought he saw a flicker of silver fur, or caught the faintest trace of jasmine and storm on the wind, he would know it wasn't grief. It wasn't wishful thinking. It was me, and I was no longer willing to stay dead for him. Chapter 3, Echoes of Betrayal. The forest exhaled around me as I retreated. Each step away from the pack house felt like pulling stitches out of still healing flesh. Slow, deliberate, necessary. My wolf snarled inside my chest, demanding we turn back, demanding we rip the green cloak from Lila's shoulders and sink teeth into anything that dared wear what was ours. I kept walking. The wolfsbane and silverleaf mixture Mira had given me was already fading. I could feel my own scent bleeding back into the air like ink dropped in water. I had maybe 30 more minutes before I became visible to any wolf paying attention. I didn't go far. There was an old lookout ridge half a mile east, high enough to see the whole valley, sheltered enough that no casual patrol ever bothered climbing it. Draven and I used to come here when the weight of being Alpha and Luna became too loud. We'd lie on our backs, count stars, talk about nothing and everything until the sky paled and the world felt small again. I climbed it now alone. When I reached the top, I didn't sit. I stood at the edge and looked down at the sprawl of Silverwood territory, glowing softly under the dying moon. The great hall was still lit, warm amber rectangles in the darkness. I could almost convince myself nothing had changed, until I remembered the kiss I'd just witnessed. Careful, tender, not frantic, not grieving, the kind of kiss people share when they're beginning to believe the future might still be kind. My throat closed. I dropped to my knees, palms pressing into cold earth, and let the first real sob tear free. Quiet, ugly, animal. It wasn't loud enough to carry. It was only for me. When the worst of it passed, I wiped my face with the back of my hand and forced myself to look again. That was when I saw them. Two figures walking the outer path near the training grounds. Cade and Mara, my oldest friends from the border patrol days. Cade's easy stride, Mara's quick bird-like movements. They hadn't changed. I watched them pause under one of the ancient oaks. Mara leaned against the trunk. Cade stood close, arms folded, head tilted the way he always did when he was listening hard. I couldn't hear them, but I didn't need to. I knew that posture. They were talking about me, about the girl who was supposed to be dead, about the Luna who vanished in the river, about how quiet Draven had been for weeks afterward, how he'd barely spoken except to give orders, how the pack had held its breath every time he walked past the memorial stone they'd raised for me near the riverbank. I pressed my fist against my mouth. They hadn't forgotten. Not completely. Mara lifted her hand and touched the bark of the oak, right where we'd all carved our initials years ago, back when we were barely more than pups dreaming of battles and mates and glory. Cade's head dropped for a second, shoulders rounding. They missed me. The realization hit softer than I expected. Not a blade this time. A hand pressing gently against bruised ribs. Someone still carried the shape of me in their chest. I stayed until they walked away, until their footsteps faded and the night swallowed them. Only then did I let myself look toward the pack house again. A light still burned in the topmost window, the Alpha's private study. Draven's study. I pictured him there, sitting at the heavy desk, maps and letters scattered, pretending to work while the room slowly filled with ghosts. Or maybe he wasn't alone. Maybe Lila was with him. Maybe she was curled in the big chair by the fire, the one I used to sit in while he paced and ranted about council politics. Maybe she was reading, or brushing her hair, or simply existing in the space I used to fill. My fingers curled into claws. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shift and run straight through the front gates and tear every soft thing apart until he looked at me the way he used to. But I didn't move, because something else was happening. The mate bond, stretched, frayed, bleeding, was stirring. Not with heat. Not with lust. With memory. Flashes came unbidden, sharp and bright, his teeth grazing the back of my neck the night he marked me. The way his growl had vibrated through my whole body when he whispered mine. The slow slide of his hands down my spine as moonlight spilled across our bed. The way he'd held me afterward, fierce and gentle at once, like I was both weapon and treasure. I closed my eyes and let the memories burn. They hurt. Gods, they hurt. But they were also proof Proof that what we'd had wasn't fiction. Proof that I hadn't imagined the way his heartbeat used to sync with mine. Proof that some part of him, however buried, however confused, still remembered. When I opened my eyes again, the light in the study had gone out. The pack house was dark. I stood slowly. My legs shook, but they held. I looked down at the territory that used to be mine, still was mine in every way that mattered, and felt something shift inside my ribcage. Not forgiveness. Not acceptance. Power. Quiet. Cold. Certain. They had mourned me. They had moved on. They had rewritten the story without me. But stories can be rewritten again. And I was no longer interested in being the tragic chapter everyone skipped over. I turned my back on the valley and started down the ridge. Halfway down, I paused. There, on the wind, came the faintest trace of something. Not Lila's jasmine and honey scent. Not the pack's collective signature. Draven. Raw cedar. Storm smoke. And underneath it all, the sharp, unmistakable bite of grief that hadn't quite faded. He was outside. Somewhere close. My wolf lifted her head inside me, ears pricked, hackles rising. He was moving through the forest. Alone. Searching. For what? For who? I didn't wait to find out. I dropped low, melted into the underbrush, and ghosted back toward Mira's cave. But I carried that scent with me. Carried it like a brand against my skin. He hadn't let go completely. And neither had I. Tomorrow night I would come closer. Tomorrow night I would let him catch the smallest whisper of my scent on the breeze. Tomorrow night he would have to decide whether the woman he buried was really gone, or whether she had simply been waiting for him to look again. I smiled into the dark as I ran. It wasn't a happy smile. It wasn't cruel. It was the smile of someone who finally understood that being erased is not the same as being powerless, and I was done staying quiet. Chapter 4. Hidden Alliances. The cave smelled of wet stone, drying herbs, and the faint copper tang of my own blood from the reopened gash on my side. I hadn't noticed it tearing again during the climb back. Adrenaline is a cruel nurse. It keeps you moving, then leaves you to pay the bill later. Mira didn't scold me when I staggered through the entrance. She simply pointed to the low pallet near the fire and went to work. Clean cloth, bitter salve, fresh bandages. Her hands were steady. Mine were not. You saw them, she said, not a question. I nodded once. Words felt too heavy to lift. She tied off the bandage, sat back on her heels, and studied me the way a blacksmith studies iron, deciding whether it's worth another heating or ready to be shaped. You're not going to ask me to stop going back, I said quietly. No. She stood, brushing ash from her palms. I'm going to ask you to stop going back empty-handed. That was how the satchel ended up in my lap an hour later. Thick, cracked leather, heavy with more than just parchment. Inside, 3 slim volumes bound in dark hide, edges worn smooth by generations of fingers. A small sealed vial of something that glowed faintly blue when the firelight hit it. A folded map of the territory, older than any I'd ever seen, with markings and faded silver ink that didn't match any border I recognized. These aren't pack records, I said, running my thumb along the spine of the topmost book. They're older, before the pack split, before alphas started believing the moon goddess handed them absolute ownership of hearts. Mira tapped the cover. Read, especially the chapter titled Severed Threads and False Marks. I opened it. The pages were brittle, the script tight and angular, old tongue mixed with common speech. I read slowly, tracing each line with my finger like I could absorb the meaning through skin. The words were mercilessly clear. A true mate bond cannot be overwritten by will alone. A new mark may quiet the pain, may dull the call, may even produce pups. But the original thread remains, stretched and bleeding, until one of 3 things happens. The first mate dies beyond any hope of return. Both mates consciously reject the bond in the presence of a blood witness. The false bond is ritually broken by the second mate's death or deliberate unmaking. I closed the book. My pulse was loud in my ears. He didn't reject me, I whispered. No, Mira said. He buried you, there's a difference. I looked down at the map next. It showed hidden trails, forgotten shrines, places marked with tiny crescent moons. Safe havens from before the great wars between packs. One symbol caught my eye. A small circle with 3 radiating lines located less than 2 miles from the pack's eastern watchtower. What is this? Sanctuary of the Unseen. A place where wolves who were declared dead could go to be reborn, legally, magically, irreversibly. The ritual requires 3 things: blood of the living, ash of the dead, and the witness of someone who still carries your name in their heart. I stared at the mark until it blurred. Someone who still carries your name in their heart. Cade, Mara, maybe even Lila, if the jealousy hadn't completely eaten whatever love used to live there. Or Draven, who still wandered the woods alone at night, Draven whose grief scent still lingered on the wind. I folded the map carefully. My hands were steadier now. I need to speak to someone inside the pack, I said. Mira didn't look surprised. You'll need more than Wolfsbane to walk among them again. She crossed to a wooden chest half buried under furs and pulled out a cloak. Deep charcoal gray, lined with something soft and shimmering that caught no light. When she draped it over my shoulders, I felt the magic immediately. A cool veil sliding over my skin, muffling scent, softening edges, making me harder to notice unless someone was looking straight at me. Shadow weave, she said. Won't make you invisible, just forgettable. Use it wisely. I nodded. Then she handed me a small iron key pitted with age. The Eastern Watchtower has a forgotten cellar. Used to store relics before the wars. There's a tunnel beneath it. Leads straight under the training fields. The key still works. I checked last spring. I looked at her, really looked. How long have you been planning for this? Since the night the river brought back a half-dead girl instead of a corpse. Her eyes were dark and kind. I've waited a long time for someone brave enough to be inconvenient again. I laughed once, short, cracked, almost real. Then I stood. The gash in my side throbbed, but it no longer owned me. I left just before dawn. Shadow cloak draped over my shoulders, the old books tucked against my ribs, the key burning cold in my palm. The Eastern Watchtower rose like a broken tooth against the paling sky. I circled it once, listening. 2 sentries on the upper platform, yawning, bored, talking about last night's dice game. No one near the base. I found the cellar door exactly where Mira said, hidden behind a false panel of ivy-covered stone. The key turned with a low, reluctant groan. Inside, damp air, cobwebs, shelves of cracked jars and forgotten weapons. And in the far corner, set into the floor, a rusted trapdoor. I lifted it. A narrow stone stair spiraled down into darkness. I descended. The tunnel smelled of earth and time. Roots had broken through the ceiling in places, forcing me to duck and sidestep. My boots were silent on centuries of dust. When I emerged, I was under the training fields, close enough to hear the morning watch changing, the clang of practice blades, the low laughter of wolves stretching after a night patrol. I stayed hidden, crouched behind a thick stand of ferns, and waited. It didn't take long. Mara appeared first, running the outer track alone the way she always did when something was eating at her. Her braid swung, her breath came steady, but her eyes were restless. I waited until she passed the ferns, then let the shadow cloak slip just enough. My scent, only a whisper, drifted toward her. She stopped dead, head snapped in my direction. Nostrils flared. For one heartbeat, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Then her lips parted. Arya? I stepped forward, just far enough for her to see the shape of me under the cloak. Her knees buckled. She caught herself against a tree. I lifted a finger to my lips. Not yet, I whispered, but soon. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent, fast. She nodded once hard. I let the cloak fall back into place. I need you to remember something, I said. The sanctuary of the unseen. You carved your name there once, you still know where it is. Her eyes widened. I continued. When the time comes, I'll need a witness who still carries my name in their heart. Will you be that witness? Mara's throat worked. She looked toward the pack house, toward the place where Lila now walked as Luna, then back at me. Yes, she rasped. Gods help me, yes. I smiled, small, pained, grateful. Then I melted back into the ferns. Behind me, I heard her exhale one trembling breath, and start running, not away, but toward the heart of the pack, carrying my name again. I turned my face toward the rising sun. The next move wasn't mine to make yet, but it was coming. And when it did, no one would be able to pretend I had never returned. Chapter 5, The Bonds Pull. The sun rose behind me as I slipped back into Mira's cave, but I barely noticed the light. My skin still buzzed from the moment Mara's eyes had locked on mine, wide, wet, alive with something between terror and desperate hope. I had been seen, not as a memory, not as a ghost story the elders told around the fire to frighten pups. Seen? I dropped the shadow cloak onto the pallet and sank down beside it. My body felt heavy, borrowed like it belonged to someone else who had run too far and too fast. Mira didn't speak right away. She simply placed a chipped clay cup of steaming valerian and hawthorn tea in my hands and sat across from me, knees drawn up, waiting. I drank slowly. The bitter heat grounded me. She remembered, I finally said. She cried. Mira nodded once. That's the first crack in the story they told themselves. I looked down into the cup. Steam curled like fragile threads. I told her about the sanctuary, about needing a witness. And she said yes. She did. Silence stretched between us, comfortable, not empty. Then Mira asked the question I'd been avoiding even in my own head. Do you still want him back? I closed my eyes. The answer wasn't simple anymore. I wanted the Draven who had kissed me like I was oxygen. I wanted the nights when he'd wake me with slow hands and murmured promises against my throat. I wanted the man who once said my name like it was a prayer he'd been practicing his whole life. But I didn't know if that man still existed, or if the one who now kissed my sister with careful tenderness had permanently replaced him. I want the bond to stop hurting, I whispered. I want to know whether it was ever real enough to survive this. Mira reached over and touched the center of my chest, right over the place where the invisible thread still lived. Then tonight you'll find out. Tonight was the full moon, the night the bond always roared loudest. I spent the day preparing, not my body but my mind. I reread the passages in the old book about the full moon's effect on true mates. How the silver light amplifies what's buried. Longing, rage, truth. How wolves who try to deny a living bond under a full moon often end up howling in pain they can't explain. I traced the words until my fingertips felt raw. When dusk came, I didn't cloak myself in shadow weave. I wanted to be felt. I chose the narrow ravine that ran parallel to the pack's eastern hunting grounds, a place we used to slip away to when the world pressed too hard. A thin stream cut through moss-covered rocks. Ferns grew thick. The moon would hit the water like molten silver. I stripped down to bare skin and shifted. My wolf form came fast, silver fur, lean muscle, scars still pink along my left flank where the Shadowclaw claws had bitten deep. I drank from the stream. The cold shocked my teeth. Then I lifted my head and let my presence bleed into the night. Not a howl. Just a pulse. The mate bond answered almost instantly. A sharp tug behind my breastbone like a hook catching flesh. He felt me. I knew it the way you know a storm is coming before the first drop falls. I began to run. Not toward the pack house. Not toward safety. In widening circles through the ravine. Letting my scent rise on the wind, letting the bond sing. Minutes later I heard him. Heavy pause. Fast. Purposeful. Draven. His black wolf form broke through the tree line at the top of the ravine. Massive, gleaming eyes already burning gold.
He froze when he saw me.
For one heartbeat the world held its breath. Then he charged. Not to attack. To reach. I didn't run away. I ran toward him. We met in the center of the stream. Water exploding around us, cold spray catching moonlight. He skidded to a stop inches away, chest heaving, ears flat, every line of him screaming conflict. I shifted first. Human skin. Wet hair plastered to my shoulders. Breath ragged. He followed a second later. Towering, naked, water streaming down the hard plains of his chest. Arya. My name in his mouth sounded like it hurt him to say it. I didn't speak. I simply stood there and let him look. Let him see the scars. The weight I'd lost. The fire in my eyes that hadn't been there before. His gaze raked over me, hungry, horrified, reverent. You're alive, he rasped. You buried me. He flinched like I'd struck him. I saw your body pulled from the river. I held, his voice cracked. I held what was left of you. That wasn't me. I know that now. He took one step closer. The water lapped at our thighs. I felt you tonight. I thought I was losing my mind again. You're not. Another step. Close enough now that I could smell him. Cedar, storm, guilt. Close enough to see the tremor in his hands. I marked her, he said. The confession sounded like it was torn out of him. I know. I thought it would stop the bleeding. Did it? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he lifted one shaking hand and brushed soaked strands of hair from my cheek. His fingers lingered, barely touching but enough to make the mate bond flare white-hot behind my ribs. No, he whispered. It never stopped. I caught his wrist. Not gently. Then why did you keep going? Because the pack needed a Luna. His voice broke. Because I needed to breathe. Because every time I closed my eyes I saw you bleeding out in my arms and I couldn't. He choked. I couldn't do it again. I stared into his eyes, those amber depths I used to drown in willingly. You replaced me with my sister. He flinched again. Harder this time. I didn't choose her because she was better. I chose her because she was the only piece of you I could still touch. The words landed like stones in deep water. Ripples spread through me. Pain, understanding, fury, something dangerously close to forgiveness. I let go of his wrist. Took one step back. The water suddenly felt freezing. You don't get to use my ghost to justify your new life. I'm not trying to justify anything. He followed, closing the distance again. I'm trying to tell you I never stopped loving you. The bond roared, fierce, undeniable. My hands fisted at my sides. Then prove it. He reached for me. I didn't stop him. His palms framed my face, rough, trembling. Our foreheads touched. Breaths mingled. For several long seconds we simply stood like that, two broken things trying to remember how they once fit together. Then he kissed me. Not careful, not tender, desperate, like a man drowning finally breaking the surface. I kissed him back the same way, teeth and hunger and months of swallowed screams. His hand slid down my spine, pulling me flush against him, skin on skin. Heat against heat. The bond sang, wild, jagged, alive. We sank to our knees in the stream together. Water rushed around us. Moonlight painted us silver. His mouth moved to my throat, right over the place he'd marked me years ago. He didn't bite, just lingered there, breathing me in like he was trying to memorize me all over again. I gripped his shoulders, nails digging in. Don't stop, I whispered. He groaned against my skin. We stayed like that, kissing, touching, remembering, until the cold became unbearable and the bond's fire wasn't enough to keep us warm. When we finally pulled apart, both shaking, both breathing hard, I looked into his eyes. You still have a choice to make, I said quietly. I know. You can't have both of us. I know. I stood. Water sluiced off my body. He watched me rise, eyes full of pain and longing and something that looked dangerously like hope. I shifted back to wolf form without another word. Silver fur, golden eyes. I turned and vanished into the ferns. Behind me I heard his low, broken howl, half grief, half plea. I didn't answer, but I carried the taste of him on my tongue all the way back to the cave. And for the first time since I'd come back from the dead, I didn't feel like I was bleeding alone. Chapter 6, Fractured Loyalties. The cave was colder than usual when I returned. Or maybe it was just me. Skin still damp from the stream, heart still hammering from the taste of Draven's mouth. Body still remembering every place his hands had pressed like they were trying to rewrite the months we'd lost. I didn't shift back right away. I stayed wolf, curled tight in the farthest corner, silver fur bristling, ears pinned. My wolf didn't want words. She wanted to pace. Tobita. To run until the ache between her ribs stopped screaming. Mira, let me be. She only spoke once, hours later, when the moon had dropped low and the fire had burned down to embers. You kissed him. It wasn't judgment. Just observation. I shifted then, human again, naked, shivering. Pulled the blanket around my shoulders like armor. Yes, and I still want to tear his throat out. My voice cracked on the last word, and I still want him to hold me until the world stops hurting. Mira nodded slowly. That's the bond doing what bonds do. It doesn't care about fairness. It only cares about truth. I pressed my forehead to my drawn-up knees. The truth is, he marked her. He sleeps beside her. He smiles at her now the way he used to smile at me, and yet he still came running when he felt you on the wind. I didn't answer, because that was the cruelest part. He had come. He had kissed me like a man starving, and then I'd left him standing in the stream, alone, shaking, howling after me. I hated how much satisfaction that gave me. I hated how much it hurt. The next night I went back inside the territory. Not to see Draven. Not yet. I needed to know who else remembered. Who else might stand beside me when the moment came to force the truth into the open? I started with the people who had once called me friend before I ever became Luna. First, Rowan, the pack's master smith. Broad-shouldered, quiet, hands permanently blackened from the forge. He'd made my mating torque, the heavy silver band Draven had locked around my throat under the blood moon. I found him late, working alone in the smithy. The doors were half open to let out the heat. Hammer strikes rang like heartbeats. I waited until he paused to quench a blade, then stepped into the firelight just enough for him to catch my scent. Rowan froze. The hammer slipped from his grip and clattered against stone. He turned slowly. When he saw me, his knees hit the ground. Not reverence. Shock. Arya? I stepped closer. He didn't rise. Tears cut clean tracks through the soot on his face. I thought they lied when they said the river took you. I kept waiting for someone to tell me it was a mistake. I crouched so we were eye level. It wasn't a mistake. I was dead for a little while. Then I wasn't. He reached out, hesitant like he expected his hand to pass through me. I caught his wrist. Solid. Real. I'm here now. Rowan's throat worked. They buried an empty box. Draven, he stopped. Swallowed. He hasn't been the same, but he's trying, with her. The word landed heavy between us. I didn't flinch. I know. Rowan looked up at me, really looked. You're not asking me to choose sides. I'm asking you to remember who I was before I was Luna. Before I was dead. Before I was replaced. He exhaled roughly. I never forgot. Then keep remembering. I left him there, still on his knees, staring at the place I'd been. Next was Sable, one of the nursery caretakers. She'd held me when I was a pup, braided my hair before my first shift, cried harder than my own mother when Draven marked me. I found her outside the children's den, rocking a fussy toddler under the stars. I didn't step into the light. I simply let my scent drift. Sable's head snapped up. She clutched the child tighter. Then very slowly she rose, walked straight toward the shadows where I stood, stopped inches away. Her eyes searched the dark. I knew you weren't gone, she whispered. A mother knows. I stepped forward. She gasped, soft, wounded. Then she reached out and pulled me into her arms like I was still 6 years old and had skinned my knee. She smelled of milk and lavender and safety. I let myself be held. Just for a moment. When she pulled back, her cheeks were wet. What do you need from me? Nothing yet, I said. Just don't let them erase me from the stories you tell the pups. Tell them the silver wolf who used to chase them through the grass is still out here. Tell them she's coming home. Sable nodded fiercely. I will. I left before the tears could finish falling. The last stop was the hardest. The memorial stone by the riverbank. Smooth gray granite, my name carved deep. A single white lily lay at the base, still fresh. I knelt, ran my fingers over the letters. Aria Vos, beloved Luna, lost to the river. Beneath it, in much smaller script, someone's private edition. Never forgotten, I pressed my forehead to the cold stone, and for the first time since I'd come back, I let myself cry the way I'd wanted to, since the poison first entered my veins. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet. Endless tears that soaked the earth where they thought I'd died. When I finally lifted my head, I wasn't alone. A shadow moved at the tree line. Cade. He didn't approach. Just stood there, arms folded, eyes shining in the dark. He'd followed my scent. Or maybe Mara had told him. Either way, he saw me. He lifted his chin once, small, sharp acknowledgement. Then he placed his fist over his heart. The old Border Patrol salute. Loyalty unbroken. I mirrored it back. No words, none needed. I rose, wiped my face, and walked away from the stone that no longer felt like a grave. It felt like a marker. A place I had passed through. Not a place I belonged anymore. When I reached the cave at dawn, Mira was waiting with fresh tea and a single question. Did you find what you were looking for? I sat, took the cup, let the warmth seep into my palms. I found pieces, I said. Enough to know I'm not fighting alone. She studied me for a long moment. And him? I looked toward the mouth of the cave, toward the direction of the pack house. He kissed me like he was drowning. Then I left him there. Mira's mouth curved, just a fraction. Good. I met her eyes. I'm not finished breaking his heart yet. She raised her cup in a small, silent toast. Then break it cleanly. Outside, the sky was turning pink. Inside me, something was turning too. Not soft, not forgiving, but certain. The next time I faced Draven, it wouldn't be in secret. It wouldn't be in shadows. It would be in daylight, in front of the pack, in front of my sister, in front of every lie they'd built since the river carried me away. And when that moment came, no one would be able to look away. Chapter 7, Revelations Under Moonlight. Dawn bled pink across the horizon, but I didn't sleep. I sat just inside the cave mouth, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them, staring at the place where the world turned from shadow to light. The taste of Draven still lingered, salt and storm and regret, mixing with the iron tang of my own bitten lip. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face the moment I left him in the stream. Eyes wide, mouth open on a soundless plea, hands reaching for something already gone. I hated that I still cared how much it hurt him. I hated more that part of me wanted to run back and let him catch me. Mira finally broke the silence around mid-morning. She set a shallow wooden bowl of bone broth beside me. Steam curled up like fragile ghosts. "You're thinking about the poison again," she said. I looked at her sharply. She shrugged one shoulder. "You always circle back to it when you're trying not to think about him." I exhaled through my nose. She wasn't wrong. The wound on my side had healed to a pale, puckered line, but the memory of those enchanted claws never quite faded. They weren't ordinary weapons. Shadowclaw raiders didn't carry silver-laced poison by accident. Someone had armed them. Someone had wanted me gone. Not just defeated, not just captured, erased. I lifted the bowl and drank slowly. The warmth spread, but it didn't touch the cold knot under my ribs. "I need to know who," I said. Mira didn't argue. She rose, crossed to the chest of relics, and returned with something I hadn't seen before. A small, stoppered glass phial containing a single dried claw fragment. Black, curved, edges still faintly shimmering with residue. "I kept one piece," she said, "from the rags they cut off you that first night." I took the phial. Held it to the light. The shimmer wasn't natural silver. It was something colder, older, night-blooming aconite, Mira said quietly. Harvested under new moon. Tempered in a forge fed by dragon bone ash. Rare. Expensive. Only 3 people in the entire Western Territories have the knowledge and the coin to commission it. I met her eyes. Names. 2 are dead. The third, she hesitated only for a heartbeat, but I caught it, is still breathing, and closer than you think. My pulse kicked hard. "Inside Silverwood?" Mira didn't answer with words. She simply turned the phial over in my palm so the claw fragment caught the light differently, revealing a tiny, almost invisible rune etched into the base. A spiral crossed by 3 diagonal slashes. My breath caught. The mark of the old council bloodline. The line that had ruled before Draven's father took the throne in the last great unification war. The line that had never forgiven the Blackthorns for taking what they considered their birthright. And the last living descendant of that line? Lord Veyron Calder, the Pax High Advisor, quiet, polished, always standing just behind Draven's left shoulder during council meetings. Always watching, always smiling the smile of someone who knows something the rest of the room does not. And, most damning of all, Lila's godfather. The man who had held her hand at her first shift ceremony. The man who had gifted her the silver fox cloak she now wore as Luna. I closed my fingers around the phial until the glass creaked. "He didn't just want me dead," I said slowly. "He wanted the throne destabilized. He wanted Draven broken, and he wanted Lila in my place because she would be easier to guide." Mira nodded once. "Veyron has always believed the Blackthorn line is a temporary stain on history. With you gone and Lila marked, he could whisper in her ear for years. Eventually the council would remember who the true heirs were supposed to be." I stood. The blanket fell away. I didn't care that I was still naked from the night before. Modesty felt like a luxury I could no longer afford. "Where does he keep his private records?" "The old tower library. 3rd floor. Locked with a blood key only he can open." I looked at Mira. "Then I need his blood." She didn't flinch. "You'll need more than blood. You'll need to get inside without raising the entire guard." I smiled, thin, sharp, almost feral. "I've been dead for months. They're not looking for me anymore. They're looking for peace." I dressed quickly. Dark leathers Mira had altered to fit my new, leaner frame. Strapped a short dagger to my thigh. Tucked the claw phial into an inner pocket. Before I left, Mira pressed something else into my hand. A small, smooth riverstone black as midnight, etched with the same spiral and slash rune. Obsidian wardstone. If you can place it against the bloodlock, it will confuse the key for a few minutes. Long enough to get inside, long enough to find what you need. I closed my fingers around it. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Her eyes were grave. "You're about to walk into the lion's den wearing the scent of the lion's mate. He'll know the moment you step inside the tower." I met her gaze. "Then let him know." I left under the cover of late afternoon, when the pack was busiest with preparations for the coming week's harvest festival. Noise. Movement. Distraction. I used the same tunnel beneath the training fields. This time I didn't stop to speak to anyone. I moved like smoke, shadow cloak draped loosely, step silent, heart steady. The old tower stood at the northwestern edge of the great house, half forgotten, ivy-choked, used mostly for storage now. Only Veyron still climbed its stairs. I circled once. No sentries. Just a single narrow door at ground level, reinforced oak banded with iron, the blood lock glowing a dull red. I pressed my palm to it. The lock pulsed, searching. I didn't bleed. Instead, I pressed the obsidian wardstone against the center rune. A low hiss. The red glow flickered, stuttered, turned muddy brown. I pushed. The door gave. Inside, dust. Old parchment. The faint smell of ink and candle wax and secrets. I climbed. 3rd floor. The door at the top was simpler, just a heavy latch. I lifted it. Stepped inside. Veyron's private study, maps pinned to every wall, shelves of ledgers, a long table scattered with letters, vials, dried herbs, and in the center of the table, a single black claw, identical to the one in my pocket. I crossed the room in 3 strides, picked it up, held it beside the fragment Mira had kept. Perfect match. My hands shook, not from fear. From fury so pure it felt like lightning under my skin. I opened the nearest ledger. Flipped pages. Found what I was looking for near the back. A single entry dated 3 days before the ambush. Payment to Shadowclaw Liaison. 40 gold sovereigns, blow 6 night-blooming aconite claws. Purpose, removal of obstacle. Balance due upon confirmation. My vision narrowed to a pinpoint. I tore the page free, folded it, tucked it inside my leathers. Then I heard the stair creak. Slow, deliberate. Someone was coming up. I melted behind the tallest shelf, held my breath. The door opened. Lord Veyron Calder stepped inside. Tall, silver-haired, still wearing the same calm, superior smile he always wore. He closed the door behind him, walked straight to the table, stopped, stared at the empty space where the claw had been. His smile disappeared. Very slowly he lifted his head. Nostrils flared, and then, quiet, almost amused, he spoke into the silence. I wondered when you'd finally stop hiding, little ghost. My blood turned to ice. He knew I was here. He'd been waiting. Chapter 8. Clash of Hearts. The study door clicked shut behind Veyron with the softness of a trap springing closed. He didn't turn immediately. He stood with his back to me, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the long table, calm, unruffled, like a man who had been expecting this visit for months. I smelled you the moment you crossed the outer wards, he said. His voice remained smooth, almost amused. Jasmine and Storm. Even death couldn't wash that signature away. I stepped out from behind the shelf. No shadow cloak. No attempt to hide. Just me. Leathers, scars, the crumpled ledger page burning against my ribs. Veyron turned slowly. His pale eyes traveled over me, cataloging the healed wound, the sharper edges of my face, the dagger at my thigh. Resilient, he murmured. A polite, thin smile. Death becomes you, little Luna. I lifted the torn page between 2 fingers. 40 gold sovereigns. 6 night-blooming aconite claws. Removal of obstacle. I let each word fall like a stone. Care to explain what obstacle I was, Lord Calder? He glanced at the paper, and no surprise, no panic. Only a small, regretful sigh. You were never supposed to be the obstacle, Arya. You were simply in the path of history. He took one measured step forward. I didn't retreat. The Blackthorn line has grown soft, he continued. Draven is strong, yes, but sentimental. He loved you too deeply to see the fractures beneath his rule. With you gone, he would break. And your sister. His smile warmed, indulgent. Lila is grateful, malleable, perfectly suited to be guided. My fingers crushed the page. You used her. I elevated her. He spread his hands, reasonable, patient. She is Luna now. Safe. Respected. The pack is stable. You should be proud. The laugh that tore out of me was short, bitter, almost feral. Proud. I stepped closer. He didn't flinch. But I saw the tiny tightening at the corners of his eyes. You paid to have me gutted, I said. You let my mate hold what he believed was my corpse. You watched him shatter. And then you handed him my sister like a salve for his grief. Veyron tilted his head. And yet here you stand. Alive, furious, still breathing my air. I lunged. Not with steel. I slammed my palm against his chest, shoving him back against the table. He caught himself, breath punched out. I pinned him, forearm across his throat, knee braced between his legs. You don't decide what's kind, I hissed. You don't decide who lives, who dies, who gets to be loved. His smile didn't falter, even with my arm cutting his air. You think this ends with me? He rasped. You think Draven will thank you for dragging his new Luna through scandal? You think the pack will embrace the dead queen who returns only to spill blood? I leaned in until our faces were inches apart. I don't need them to embrace me. I need them to see me. A low, wet chuckle escaped him. Then go. Show them. But understand this. His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. The moment you step into the light, you force his hand. He will have to choose. And he has already chosen once. The words landed like claws. I shoved away from him, hard. He coughed once, straightened his tunic with infuriating composure. I backed toward the door. He didn't follow. He only watched, eyes gleaming with something close to pity. Run back to your cave, Ghost, he said softly. Savor your last nights of freedom. Because when the sun rises tomorrow, Draven will know you're here, and he will come. I paused in the doorway, looked back. You're wrong about one thing. He raised a brow. I let my mouth curve, small, dangerous. He already knows. I turned and ran, down the spiral stairs, through the tunnel, into the night. I didn't stop until I reached the ravine, the same stretch of moonlit stream where we had collided under the full moon. I dropped to my knees beside the water, breath ragged, hands shaking. The ledger page was still crushed in my fist, ink smeared, edges torn. I pressed it to my chest, right over the place where the bond still lived, still bled. And then I howled. Not grief, not mourning. Fury, truth, existence. The sound rolled through the ravine, carried on the wind, reaching every ear in Silverwood territory. Especially his. I felt the instant he heard it. A violent tug behind my breastbone, like a rope snapped taut. He was coming. I stayed on my knees. Didn't run. Didn't hide. Just waited, wet hair clinging to my neck, leathers dark with sweat and river spray, eyes fixed on the tree line. Minutes later, the underbrush exploded. Draven burst through in human form, shirtless, barefoot, chest-heaving, eyes already blazing gold. He stopped dead when he saw me. For several long, shattering heartbeats, and neither of us moved. Then his voice cracked on my name. Arya. I rose slowly, held up the crumpled page. They tried to kill me, I said. Not chance. Not the Shadow Claws. Someone inside paid for my death. His gaze dropped to the paper, then lifted to my face. I watched horror, then understanding, then rage flood his expression. Who? The word was barely more than a snarl. I stepped toward him, then another, until we were close enough to feel each other's heat. I pressed the page into his hand. He looked down. Read. His fingers closed so hard the parchment tore. When he lifted his eyes again, they were no longer just amber. They were fire. I'm going to kill him, he said, low, lethal, certain. I nodded once. I know. He reached for me, hands framing my face, rough, trembling. Our foreheads crashed together, breath against breath. The bond roared, wild, jagged, alive. His mouth found mine, desperate, starving. Teeth and hunger and months of swallowed screams. I kissed him back the same way. Nails digging into his shoulders, body arching into his, tasting salt and guilt and love that refused to die. His hands slid down my back, gripping, pulling me flush against him. Clothes shifted. Skin brushed skin. Heat flared. The bond sang, demanding, pleading. But then I felt it. The ghost of another mark. Not on me, on her. I froze. My palms flattened against his chest and not pulling him closer. Pushing. Just enough. He stilled instantly, breath ragged against my mouth. I looked up into his eyes, close enough to see the storm inside them. I want you, I whispered, raw, honest. More than I've ever wanted anything. But not like this. His throat worked. I won't share you, I said. Not even for one night. Not while your mark is still on her neck. Pain flashed across his face, sharp, deep. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply nodded, once slow like a man accepting sentence. His hands fell away from my hips. But he didn't step back. He stayed close, forehead still pressed to mine, breathing me in like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I will fix this, he said, and voice low, broken. I swear it on my blood, on the moon, on everything I am. I searched his eyes, saw the truth there, bleeding, raw, unshakable. I lifted one hand and laid it over his heart. Then fix it, I said quietly. But do it cleanly. No shadows. No half measures. I won't come back to a lie. He closed his eyes, nodded again. When he opened them, something had shifted. Not softer, but harder. More certain. I choose you, he said. Always. Again. Forever. I let my thumb brush his jaw, once gentle. Then prove it. I stepped back. The cold rushed in where his heat had been. I turned toward the trees. Didn't look back, but I felt him watching. Felt the weight of his gaze, the promise in his silence, the storm he was about to unleash inside his own house. I walked away, head high, heart cracked open, but no longer bleeding alone. Chapter 9. Trials of the Soul. The ravine fell silent behind me as I walked away. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from exhaustion, but from the sudden emptiness where Draven's heat had been. The bond still thrummed between us, alive and angry and aching, but now it carried a new note. Waiting. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I simply kept moving until the trees swallowed the sound of the stream, and the night wrapped around me like a second skin. By the time I reached Mira's cave, the sky had begun to pale at the edges. Mira was already awake, sitting cross-legged by the low fire, sharpening a small bone-handled knife with slow, deliberate strokes. She didn't ask where I'd been. She didn't need to. I dropped onto the pallet across from her, elbows on knees, face in hands. He saw the ledger page, I said. He knows it was Veyron. Mira's whetstone paused once, then resumed, and he swore he would fix it. My voice came out quieter than I intended. He said he chooses me. Again. Forever. She studied me for a long moment. You don't believe him. I believe he means it right now. I lifted my head. But meaning it in the dark with me is different from saying it in daylight in front of the entire pack. In front of her, Mira set the knife down. Then the real trial begins. She was right. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended kind of quiet. I stayed hidden, trained until my muscles screamed, read the old texts until my eyes burned, waited for the storm I had unleashed to break, and it did on the third morning. I felt it before I heard it. A ripple through the bond, sharp, sudden, violent. Draven was moving. Not wandering, not searching, deciding. I climbed the ridge above the cave and looked down toward the valley. Smoke rose thicker than usual from the great house. Wolves gathered in the central clearing, more than a normal morning muster. Voices carried on the wind, low, urgent, overlapping. Something was happening. I pulled the shadow cloak tighter and descended. I didn't go all the way to the pack house. I stopped at the edge of the old oak grove, close enough to see, far enough to stay unseen. The entire pack had assembled in a wide half-circle around the raised stone platform, used for announcements and judgments. Draven stood at the center, black leathers, hair tied back, posture rigid as forged iron. Beside him, Lila. She wore the green cloak again, my cloak, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Her face was pale, eyes wide, lips pressed into a thin line. Across from them stood Veyron Calder. Calm, composed, still wearing that faint, superior smile. But I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers flexed at his sides. Draven's voice rang out, clear, carrying to every wolf present. 3 nights ago I received proof of treason inside our own walls. Murmurs rolled through the crowd. He lifted the torn ledger page, held it high so the morning light caught the ink. Payment records. Night-blooming aconite clause. A contract for murder, signed in the hand of Lord Veyron Calder. Gasps, shouts. A few wolves instinctively stepped back from Veyron. He didn't move, only lifted his chin. Bold words, my king, he said smoothly. Bold and dangerously unsupported. Draven's lip curled. I have the clause. I have the witness who kept the evidence when the river was supposed to erase it. His gaze flicked toward the trees, toward me, though he couldn't see me. But I don't need more proof to know what you did. He turned to face the pack fully. Veyron Calder paid the shadow clause to kill my mate. To kill Arya Voss. The name hit the clearing like a thunderclap. Wolves looked at each other. Some cried out. Some dropped to their knees. Lila's hands flew to her mouth. Veyron laughed, short, cold. A ghost story, then. A convenient resurrection. How poetic. Draven stepped forward. The air around him crackled. She is no ghost. He lifted his voice again, louder, harder. Arya lives. The pack erupted. Some howled in joy. Some in disbelief. Some in fear. Draven waited until the noise died. Then he looked straight at Lila. Her eyes were already filling with tears. She knew. She had known something was coming. Draven's voice dropped, still loud enough for everyone to hear, but softer now. Almost gentle. I marked you because I believed she was gone. I thought the bond had died with her. I was wrong. Lila's shoulders began to shake. Draven continued, slow, deliberate. I will not live a lie any longer. Not for the pack. Not for politics. Not even for you. He reached out, not to embrace her, to touch the side of her neck, right over the mate mark he had placed there months ago. Lila flinched. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Draven looked at her, really looked. I'm sorry, he said. The words were quiet, but they carried. Then he closed his eyes. I felt it through the bond before I saw it. A wrenching, tearing sensation like something being ripped free from living flesh. Draven's growl was low, guttural, pained. Lila cried out, sharp, broken. The mark flared once, bright silver, then faded. Gone. The bond between them snapped clean. The air shivered. Lila staggered. Cade and Mara were suddenly there, catching her before she fell. Draven opened his eyes. Sweat beaded on his brow. His breathing was ragged, but he stood tall. He turned back to the pack. Arya Voss is my true mate. My Luna. My queen. Silence. Then slowly wolves began to drop to one knee. Rowan first. Then Sable. Then Mara. Then Cade. One by one. Until only Veyron remained standing. Draven faced him. You have one chance, he said. Run. Or face judgment. Veyron's smile finally cracked. He looked around, saw the sea of kneeling wolves. Saw the end of everything he had planned. Then he bolted. Shifted mid-stride. Grey wolf, lean and fast, streaking toward the forest. Draven didn't chase. He simply lifted his head and howled. A deep, commanding call. The pack answered. Dozens of wolves surged forward. Border guards, hunters, young warriors, all moving as one. Veyron didn't get far. I stayed in the trees. Watching. Not moving. Not yet. When the pack returned, dragging a bound, bloodied wolf between them, I finally stepped forward. Out of the shadows. Into the light. The clearing went still. Every eye turned to me. Silver hair loose. Scars visible. Eyes burning. I walked straight through the parted crowd. Straight to the stone platform. Straight to Draven. He watched me approach, chest rising and falling, eyes full of everything he hadn't been allowed to say for months. I stopped in front of him. Looked up. The bond sang, clear, unbroken, fierce. No ghost between us anymore. I lifted my hand, placed it over his heart, felt it slam against my palm. You kept your word, I said quietly. He covered my hand with his. I told you I would choose. I searched his face, saw the exhaustion there, the guilt, the relief, and beneath it all, love, still, always. I rose on my toes, pressed my forehead to his, closed my eyes. The pack watched in silence. No cheers, no howls, just witness. I spoke so only he could hear. I'm not ready to forgive everything yet. I know, but I'm ready to try. His arms came around me, slow, careful, like he was afraid I might vanish again. I let him hold me, let the warmth of him seep into the places that had been cold for too long, and for the first time since the river, I smiled. Small, trembling, real. Through the ache, through the scars, through the months of grief and rage and lonely survival, I was home. Not because the pack knelt, not because the mark was gone, but because the man holding me had finally looked at the truth and chosen to fight for it. Chapter 10, Eternal Bonds. The clearing remained hushed long after the last echoes of Veyron's capture faded. Wolves rose slowly from their knees, not in a rush, not with cheers, but with the quiet gravity of people who had just witnessed something sacred break and be remade. Draven still held me, one arm wrapped low around my waist, the other cradling the back of my head so my cheek rested against his chest. His heartbeat thundered under my ear, fast, unsteady, alive. I didn't pull away. I let myself feel it. The rise and fall, the warmth, the faint tremor that told me he was still afraid this moment might disappear like smoke. The pack watched us. Some faces I recognized instantly. Cade, Mara, Rowan, Sable. Others were younger wolves who had only known me as a name on a stone. All of them were silent. Lila stood a few paces away, flanked by Mara and another female warrior. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself. The green cloak had slipped off one shoulder. Her eyes, red-rimmed, glassy, met mine for one long, shattering second. I saw everything in that look. Guilt, grief, shame, and something softer. Something that remembered braiding my hair, stealing sweets from the kitchen together, whispering secrets under blankets when storms rolled in. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I gave her the smallest nod. Not forgiveness yet, but acknowledgement. We would have to find our way back to each other later. Not today. Draven felt the shift in me. He loosened his hold just enough to look down. "Are you ready?" he asked, voice low, only for me. I searched his face, saw the shadows still lingering there. Guilt that might never fully fade, fear that he had damaged something irreplaceable. But I also saw resolve. And love, stubborn, battered, enduring. I lifted my hand and brushed my thumb along the line of his jaw. "Yes," I said. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since the river. Then he turned to face the pack again, keeping one arm around me so I stayed anchored against his side. "Tonight," he said, voice carrying clear across the clearing. "Under the moon that first bound us, we will finish what was interrupted. No grand speech, no explanations, just truth." Murmurs of understanding rippled outward. Several older wolves nodded solemnly. The younger ones looked between us with wide, wondering eyes. Draven looked down at me once more. "Will you have me again?" he asked, quiet, formal, the old ritual words. I felt the bond pulse, bright, certain, waiting. I rose on my toes, pressed my lips to the corner of his mouth, just a brush. "I already have," I whispered. His eyes closed briefly. When they opened again, they were wet. He turned us both toward the pack house. The crowd parted. We walked through them, side by side, hands linked now, until we reached the wide stone steps. Only then did he stop. He faced them one last time. "Let the borders be strengthened. Let the young be trained. Let the old be honored. But let no wolf ever doubt again. Arya Voss is Luna, and she is mine." A low, rolling howl rose, first from Rowan, then Cade, then Mara, then dozens more. Not celebration. Recognition. Acceptance. The sound washed over me like warm rain. Draven led me inside. The great doors closed behind us. The rest of the day passed in quiet preparation. Healers checked my old scars. I bathed in the private spring behind the house, water scented with moonflower and cedar. Sable came with a simple silver gown, not ornate, not heavy with jewels, just soft and flowing and familiar. The same cut I had worn the night he first marked me. When night fell, the pack gathered again, this time in the sacred grove at the heart of the territory. Ancient oaks formed a natural circle. Moonlight poured through the canopy like liquid silver. A low fire burned at the center, fed with white ash and rosemary. Draven waited there, bare-chested, black leathers low on his hips, the silver torque around his throat catching the light. I walked to him barefoot through the moss. The pack formed a loose ring around us, silent witnesses. No drums, no chants, just the wind in the leaves and the crackle of the fire. Draven took both my hands, turned my palms up, pressed his lips to each one, slow, reverent. Then he spoke the words that had once bound us. "I, Draven Blackthorn Alpha of Silverwood, offer my blood, my strength, my soul. I swear to guard you, to cherish you, to choose you. In life, in death, in every life after." His voice trembled on the last phrase. I lifted my chin. "I, Arya Voss, accept your bond. I offer my heart, my loyalty, my fire. I swear to stand beside you, to challenge you when you falter, to hold you when the world is heavy." He smiled then, small, broken, beautiful. Then he drew me close. His hand slid to the nape of my neck, tilted my head. The pack watched as he kissed me, slow at first, then deeper, hungrier. The bond flared, hot, bright, consuming. He pulled back just enough to speak against my lips. "May I mark you again?" I nodded.
"Yes."
He lowered his mouth to the place where the old mark had faded, faint scar tissue now. I felt the scrape of teeth, the sharp sting. Then heat, white-hot, flooding every vein. I gasped, fingers digging into his shoulders. The pack answered with a single unified howl, deep and resonant. Draven's arms tightened around me as the mark settled, new, bright, permanent. When he lifted his head, his eyes were gold. Mine mirrored them. We stood like that, foreheads touching, breathing each other in, while the fire crackled and the moon watched. Later, much later, when the pack had dispersed and the grove was empty, he carried me back to our chambers. Not rushing, not claiming, just holding. We didn't speak much. Words felt too small. Instead, we undressed each other slowly, relearning every line, every scar, every place time and pain had changed us. When we finally came together, it was quiet, intense, reverent, almost aching. Every touch an apology, every sigh a promise. Afterward, we lay tangled in the furs, his head on my chest, my fingers in his hair. The bond hummed, steady now, no longer bleeding. I traced the new mark on my neck with one fingertip. He shivered. "I thought I'd lost this forever," he whispered. I pressed my lips to his temple. You didn't. He lifted his head, looked at me with something like wonder. You came back. I was always coming back. A long silence. Then he spoke again, voice rough. There's something else. I raised a brow. He slid his hand down my stomach, slow, careful. Stopped just below my navel. I felt it tonight, he said. While we were bound again, something new. I froze. He pressed his palm flat. A tiny pulse answered, faint but unmistakable. My breath caught. Draven. He smiled, slow, trembling, radiant. A pup. Tears stung my eyes. Happy ones this time. I covered his hand with mine. Felt the small life already growing there, ours. I laughed once, soft, disbelieving. Then I pulled him down and kissed him, deep, slow, full of everything we'd survived. When we parted, he rested his forehead against mine. Whatever comes next, he murmured, we face it together. I nodded. Together. Outside the window, the moon hung full and bright. Inside, the future felt possible again. Fragile, hard-won, but real. And for the first time since I woke in that damp cave, I believed I might finally be home. If Arya's fight, Draven's redemption, and the fire of a bond that refused to die touched something inside you, then don't let the story end here in silence. Tap the heart if you felt the ache when she walked away from the stream. Droppy if the moment he broke the false mark gave you chills. Comment I'm still here if you cheered when Arya finally stepped back into the moonlight and claimed her place. And if you want more, of their healing, of the pup growing inside her, of the new shadows already gathering on the horizon. Smash that subscribe add to library button right now, because this isn't just their story anymore, it's ours. The next episode is coming, but only if you're standing with them when the moon rises again. So tell me in the comments, what broke your heart the most? Who do you still can't forgive? And are you ready for what's coming next? See you under the next full moon.